Okay, I think we'll get started here. I think we've got 3 breakout sessions, and what I want to do is I want some discussion on what was discussed in each of the individual breakout sessions. Hopefully, we arrived at some individually, separately, at the same conclusions. We may have also discussed different things in different breakout sessions. But anyway, so I think what we'll do is we'll start with breakout session 1. April will do that. Breakout session 2, I think it will be Haya will do that for breakout session 2, and then I'll do the breakout session 3.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, John. So the SC1 breakout session was led by Moira Swain from Lehman, Reza Kayat from City College, Ryan Morelli from Brooklyn College, and Andrew Delameda also from Brooklyn College. And the time went really quick because it was a great discussion. It was really fabulously organized, and you all had like a section which was really good, and the questions were really good too. So, and I'll just sort of give a little summary of some of the discussion. So Moira started it out talking about the letter of support. And that was really interesting because it really started an entire discussion on how much release time to ask for an SC1. Because although release time is required for SC2, it's not required for SC1. It's one of those things that, from Moira's point of view, if you ask for it, it's a positive. And there was a sense that maybe you actually really even need it. Without it being stated in the RFA, you actually need to be able to say in the letter, supported by your chair and dean, that yes, we'll give you like 50% release time. But I think so Ryan now said he got a grant funded through the SC1 mechanism and never asked for release time. So he never needed any letters of support.
Well, you need a letter, but it just...
Right. That's right. So, but the other thing Moira said was really important is collaborators. If you have collaborators, don't just let them write anything in their letter of support. Send them a draft and make sure that letter is really specific as to what the collaborator is going to do for you and what the expectations are. So I think that's actually a really important point because usually, in my experience, everything's left to the last second. So we'll put it all together, and the letters of recommendation, if you're not providing of support, if you're not providing a draft for them to follow, then at the last minute you might get a letter just a few hours before it's going to be submitted, and it's totally inadequate, but you've got no recourse. So taking the time to write a draft of someone else's letter of support is a really good thing to do. All right, budget. Okay, so there was this sense, and which I've heard too, that you get what you ask for in school, as long as it's well justified. That no one's going to cut your budget. Because usually with NIH and NSF, you get this idea that you have to pad your budget because the program officers are simply going to lock 10 or 20% off the top. It doesn't always happen. But if it does happen, that can actually have a serious consequence on your ability to do your research if you've been 120% honest in how much it's going to cost you to do it. But in school, that rarely happens. So you can just be kind of straight up about these are my needs. There were questions about different kinds of archive funding and whether you can have them. And you can't have, if you have any kind of research grant, R-style grant, R01, R21, don't even bother trying to write a score because you won't get it. But if you had a grant and then you don't have it anymore, if it's just one, I do believe you're still eligible for score funding. So I think that's something important to figure out. Let's see, what else do we have here? Okay. So then the research method. Who did the research method? The research plan. All right. You'll do it. So here's a really, really important thing to remember for SC1, 2, or 3. Do not have aim 1 be a new method on which all the other aims depend. All right? Don't claim you're going to make some kind of widget which you're going to use in aims 2 and 3, because if you never manage to make the widget, then that's it. The whole thing's going to get blown up. So don't do that. I think that's really important. And the other thing I thought was really good. Okay, so and it plays into the whole review process. The reviewer number one in the study panel. We'll get more into the reviews in a minute. They have to give a summary of what your grant is all about. Just like at NSF, someone's got to kind of set the tone, set the scene for the rest of the panel. And you can actually plant little sort of summary paragraphs in your proposal that the reviewer can basically lift out and explain your grant to the rest of the panel. In other words, you've got to nudge them. It's some kind of behavioral economics where you're going to nudge your reviewers into accepting your ideas. And part of that is to create a summary paragraph, maybe at the end of each aim or at the end of each section. Just sum it up and try and think, if I was, what do I need to do to help remind the reviewer of my main points? And this, I would put it down as in the form of a nudge. You want to be able to nudge them in the right direction. And the right direction for you is for them to accept your ideas. And so a little summary paragraph at the end of each section or at the end of the aim, I think is a really good idea. And I wrote down here, be kind to your reviewer. You don't know this person, but they're really, they're judging you, so be kind to them. This is another one. This one was good. Discuss how your SC1 return on investment is an RO1 in each aim. Okay? The whole thing with SCORE is how will it make you more competitive for R-class funding afterwards? So you have to constantly state how this is going to happen. So in each aim, say if you accomplish the aim, if you're making a widget or whatever it is you're going to do, say at the end of each aim how that's going to help you be more competitive for an R funding later. So this is a really good idea. The repeat from review. Okay, so Andrew talked a lot about the sort of review process, and he said something that I guess I'd always sort of known but never heard it really said, that award probability for NIH correlates with NIH rank. If your medical school is right up there in the top 10, then you're more likely to get funded than if your medical school is right in the bottom percentile. And that leaves CUNY as a disadvantage because we don't have a lot of NIH funding. In fact, when I came to CUNY from Mount Sinai, and I wrote a revision of my NIH grant, and I had two that I brought with me, and I wrote a revision, and the first comment in the critique I saw from the environment was, CUNY is not a place that's acceptable to do this kind of work. It killed it, that was a terrible thing for me to hear, because I've been doing this work quite successfully somewhere else. There was no reason I couldn't continue to do it at City College, and yet there was this sense that CUNY was not a proper, or City College was not a proper environment, and that was devastating. I mean, you have to constantly battle that. And I think we still do today. So, So it turns out, I said, when I gave my presentation earlier, that I never saw the review panels listed for SCORE when I looked on the NIH site. But it turns out I was put right by the folks who know. They do list the panels, but because they're special emphasis panels, they're only created shortly before the panel meets. So you have to constantly look back at the special emphasis panel review groups list, and they will have the SCORE grants panels listed. Now this is really important because you want to look through them and figure out if there's somebody in your field who you know who's on your panel. Now you don't know, if there's 4 or 5 panels, you don't really know exactly which one you're going to go through. But take a good guess. If you see someone who's in your field, make sure you quote their papers favorably in the background section. And at least don't criticize their work. Because that will definitely put you at a disadvantage. And I know that from personal experience. It's sad but true that if you see your own work quoted in someone else's paper, or especially in a grant, and it's like, well, Kaplan did a crappy job on this, therefore I need to be doing this, that, and the other. You're not going to look at that too favorably. And Andrew also spoke about how the grants are triaged at 50%, meaning that there's an initial score given by each reviewer, and if the scores are in the lowest 50%, they're just not even discussed. So that's not to be triaged. And he talked again about score driving strengths and weaknesses, and I really like that. It's like, what are the strengths and weaknesses that are going to drive your score up or drive your score down? And of course, that's totally related to how the RFA is written in terms of significance, approach, etc. So I think that is really an important point to make, that it all comes back to how the RFA is written. What exactly in the strengths, what exactly in the significance and approach sections and innovation sections, how is it written in the RFA, and how does my writing directly relate to what they're asking of me? Because we all have a narrative about our own work, but when writing for NIH or NSF for that matter, you've got to adapt that narrative to what they want. And that's what a score-driving strength and a weakness is. The score-driving weakness is when you don't adapt your narrative to what they want. So always think about that in their words. And then there was a discussion on the overall impact and what is the basis of a priority score. And here's another piece. Sustained powerful influence on the field. That's what you have to provide. And sometimes that's, hard to really sort of visualize in your own work. How does my work really impact the field? And I think you have to find a way to articulate that and spend time thinking about this question. Is it theoretically, interesting? That's another perspective. If you think about that as a question, you might think it's obvious that it's interesting because you're doing it and you're interested by it. But why is it interesting? Why should it be interesting to other people? And really kind of expand on that. And is it methodologically sound? Especially if it's a new method or you're working at methods on the edge of innovation or that are truly innovative, you've really got to provide a convincing argument as to why it's sound. Really spell it out and explain. And your research does not have to be translational. And there was some discussion on sex differences in animals and how you have to be very careful not to just say you'll use mice, but you'll do this with the same number of male and female mice. Pitfalls, are they considered? I think a pitfall section where you honestly look at your own methods. And this is also, this hasn't been discussed, but it's something that I've done in the past. Pitfalls is a good section to use the straw man approach to describe pitfalls that are real, but unlikely. And say, this may happen, and this may happen. I've considered a range of things that could go wrong, but, in all likelihood, they're either unlikely, or B, I have a plan B if it does go wrong. And there's nothing wrong with using the straw man to talk about your weaknesses. So finally, although someone brought this up as a sort of irony in the SCORE program about the integration of students, or the lack of integration of students into your grant. Now, from my perspective, I have a judgment on that, but it's irrelevant because that's what SCORE wants it to be all about you. But at the same time, they want your institution to be all about its students, especially underrepresented minority students. So if you have undergraduate students in your lab, especially for underrepresented minorities, then highlight them in your bio sketch. Talk about it. Just have a line that says, I have trained all of these students in the past from underrepresented minorities. It won't hurt you, probably help you, even though the grant itself shouldn't involve training of other students. And personally, I think that's a shame, but that's definitely how the program has maintained itself over the years, so they must have a reason for that. So have I covered it, guys? Yeah. Thanks a lot. Who's the guest teacher? Who's the guest teacher? Were you going to present it?
I'll quickly summarize the SC2. So the SC2 is the pilot project score grant. And we had 5 panelists, so there was a lot of discussion about each of our experiences. Some of the common themes that came up is, Frida talked about the very structured way that the pre-proposal system's done at Hunter, and that's excellent, but not all the campuses have such a structured approach. So you have to work very clearly to identify what people are going to be guiding us through. And the next thing that we talked a fair amount about was how to choose mentors and consultants. And one of the questions that came up was, I said that in my SE2, I picked 2 mentors. And that was seen as a strength by the reviewers. There was some discussion about, maybe now you're only allowed to pick one. I don't know what the rules are, but ones I picked, one had a track record of NH funding, one didn't have a track record of NH funding, had a track record of NSF funding for many years. And the consultant was someone who had an R1 for many years. And that was seen as a good thing. We talked about don't pick your PhD advisor as a mentor. And then another common theme that came up as well, am I eligible for the SC2 if I've already applied for an NSF career? We didn't really come to a firm conclusion on that. You probably have to pick up the phone and talk to the NSF program officer. And then we talked about our various experiences. In my opinion, your best friend is the program staff at NHS. And I picked up the phone many times and spoke with Dr. Zlotnick, and every single time I talked to her, she was incredibly helpful and saved me on many occasions from making mistakes. And I think I've spoken to Irina once, but she also sounds like a very knowledgeable person who's prepare yourself when you talk to them. Don't just pick up the phone and have a set of notes where you go down item by item and ask very specific questions, but they will give you very specific answers. Very, very helpful. They want you to get money so that you are more competitive. They're there to help you. Is there anything else that you would like to add that I missed?
I think we talked more about writing.
Yes, you talked
Our
about
grant
it.
is one of the first ones you did, I guess.
Yes, it's for
So a
the,
lot of us was our very first grant ever.
you gave a very good description of how to do it if you're a cell biologist. I'm a behavioral neuroscience person, so I didn't quite grasp all that stuff. I have a little bit of a different take on things. But run it by your mentors and consultants, especially the consultant, because they're going to get paid, right? When the grant gets awarded, they should be able to give you feedback.
You all mentioned you had it read by other people.
Yes.
I like that a lot.
And then I guess the last thing we did spend some time on was, yes, you cannot pay students. We talked about some people have ways of getting around that, but you have to be very careful because at least at my campus, at the end of each year, the progress reports when they were written is the office which would say, well, who have you been paying? And then there's a little drop down. What are they? And if you click student, you're going to get in trouble. At least in my campus. So I hired a full-time technician at graduate university, so I just never had that problem. I would talk to your grants office before you get one of these, so that you don't get in trouble, because Dr. Zlotnick definitely told me before, no, you cannot pay students.
Even if they're designated as a research technician?
Yeah, that was what people brought up, is, like, if they're not doing student activities in the summer.
So even RF has a place where you have graduate research assistant, and that's what you're also, they're like a research assistant,
Yes.
but you're also a graduate student. I mean,
But you could designate them as a research assistant or technician and pay them
yes,
without getting into trouble.
yes, no.
Well, I mean, you have to be very careful not to call them a student.
Yes.
Okay? Even though they're a student and a research technician, the fact of the matter is that doing both.
And then for the technician working in addition.
Yeah, exactly, so, but don't call them students and keep that very clean for them, they don't want that commingling of terms.
But in reality, the students are doing chores in the lab, right? So,
Yeah, in reality, they are.
I don't know. If they wash the dishes, I don't know.
All right, it's time for SC3, I think.
So there were three presenters, all excellent. There was Yu Gao, who was not present, but she was on the phone. There was Elise Champale, and Naftali O'Connor. Yu Gao is from Brooklyn College. Elise is from John Jay, and Naftali is from Lehman College. Okay, so they all provided kind of guidance and tips, advice on what worked for them. You said that one of the very important things, the first important support that she received was she attended a workshop at her institution, a workshop that dealt with SCORE grants, and she felt that that was extremely helpful when she was starting out. So if you have workshops at your individual institutions, it's probably not a bad thing to do. I think now that we're kind of doing it, doing workshops centrally, maybe the best thing to do, a good thing to do, would be collect some of the best practices, the things that seem to work for everybody. Maybe bring everybody together. It might not be a bad idea. You said that make the best use of the internal review mechanism. So whenever there's an internal review mechanism, and that was discussed throughout our discussion. There was this issue of informal review versus formal. Even Elise mentioned it later. I reached out to some people to help me get some informal reviews. And that, so reviewing your proposal beforehand is very, very important. Don't try to do it without any kind of review. It's probably not going to be as strong as it would be with some kind of review. Make sure that you have enough time, you leave enough time at the end for your sponsor programs office. The last thing you want to do is you kind of dump this on them at the last minute. And I'm sure you've had experiences with them on this, but it's important to keep in mind that they have to put this thing together, and they also have pressures. And your proposal is not the only proposal they're submitting. A letter of institutional support is important as well, and pay careful attention to that. And then you said, one of the last things she said is that even after you've submitted the proposal, think ahead. Think about what you're going to do in case it gets declined. Think about resubmission. What are you going to do in the case of resubmitting a proposal? And then we talked a little bit about the timing of the resubmission. What is the best thing to do? Should be, you're going to submit a proposal in January. You're not going to get your reviews back till May, June, the earliest. By then, the next round is open. What do? Should you submit your proposal without summary review? What happens if you don't get anything back by then? But anyway, I think we all came to the conclusion it's important to get feedback, some kind of summary review back, so that you can improve your proposal if you're going to be submitting it again. You're going to do a resubmission. And then Elise from John Jay, she highlighted a few things. She said one of the important things to think about is try to think about what the reviewers are looking for. Put your mind in the reviewer's mind. What is it that you're looking for? How significant is your research? How is it going to improve the science, improve knowledge? That's what this is all about. And that innovation is also extremely important. What is new and exciting? And for her, this was one of the most difficult things to do. The innovation part was difficult because she wanted to highlight how innovative and how new her project is. A lot of the other things, like the environment and the investigator, are things that are already, these are requirements that, are already in place. It's just a matter of describing previously published works, the environment, the research environment within your institution. That's pretty much a fait accompli. There's no way you're going to be able to do that. Although I do think trying to put together a well organized argument about the environment and the research institution is important. So I don't think we should be undermining the importance of preparing a document that has includes some powerful aspects, some powerful considerations about your institution and how effective it has been in advancing research. So, also, talk to your colleagues in your own institution. Would they like to use, how would they like to use your research? Share with them what you're doing. Do they want to use some of this research in their proposals? Is there any way of teaming up with them and collaborating closely with them? Can you bring new innovative aspects from their research into your research? I mean, I thought that was an important comment. Would they want to collaborate with you in the future? And what new ideas do they bring? When I give advice to faculty when they're submitting NSF grants, I always say to them that NSF is looking for collaborative ideas, interdisciplinary collaborative ideas. They're increasingly funding projects that are at the interface of different disciplinary areas. So it's important to keep that in mind when you're putting a proposal together, that bringing colleagues from include social sciences, engineering, and computer sciences, those really are powerful proposals if you're able to do that. But another interesting point that Elise raised is that she had a lot of wonderful ideas after she talked to her colleagues, but SC3 is only $75,000. I can't include all those ideas in a proposal like that. I have to sift through all those ideas and find the best ideas and include them in the proposal. So there's a lot of work to be done even after you sit down, and even if you have an idea, good ideas, there might be too many good ideas. You need to go through an additional sifting process, filtering process of picking the best ones. Having preliminary data, absolutely essential for her in the proposal. And very important requirement for school. And a lot of NIH, and frankly, all research proposals. If you have preliminary data, it shows that at least you've done your homework, and that you have an idea that's feasible. And that's what they're looking for. It's something that's feasible and very important. Cultivate a good relationship with your program officer. Goes without saying. It is essential, and we were just talking a little bit with Avram about this, how to approach a program officer, how to go and develop a relationship if you don't have one developed. If you're a seasoned researcher and you've developed a relationship with a program officer, there's nothing wrong with picking up the phone and calling them, because you already know them, they already know you. It's when you're new to this where it becomes more treacherous, and especially if you're submitting a proposal. And I think that's where I think you need probably should be thinking about very, very carefully about what you want to talk to them about. So you should probably pre-script a list of questions and a list of ideas that you want to talk with your program officer about. Have a plan B. just, what are the pitfalls? And what are you gonna do in case Plan A doesn't work? And it was mentioned that some of the proposals that the faculty submitted did have Plan Bs, and they were very helpful. Don't reach out, don't be afraid to reach out to people who are big fish in your research area. Her experience was that when she did that, it was extremely helpful. People did not kind of snub her because she's a low-level researcher. They were extremely helpful, and that advice proved to be successful in developing her, advancing her research. If you get a grant, go to Bethesda and meet with the program officers and the PIs. For the SCORE program, there's an annual grant meeting for the successful PIs. Don't miss an opportunity. It's an opportunity that will help you. Okay, and Naftali, last but not least, his advice is find the grant mechanism that fits you. Don't take a square peg and try to fit it in a round hole. That's not going to work. He discussed his 3 proposals that he had submitted, the last one successfully to the SC3. I think it was his comment that said, if you think you're going to be clever, the reviewers are probably more clever than you are. So don't try to be too clever about your proposal. Try to be honest and discuss ideas with others. Don't be too cagey. Try to get your manuscript out and submit it before you submit your application, especially if you're starting in a new area. The reviewers want to see some kind of track record. And if you've developed if you've written a manuscript and you've submitted it, put it in your proposal. If that manuscript is published before the panel meets, contact your program officer and let them know that this is published now, so that you can get credit for the fact that the manuscript is published. And publish. It's important to go out there and publish. Improve your grants-making, grantsmanship skills. So, he read a book on how to write good grants, and that was extremely helpful to him. Of course, we're here to help him do that as well. And that he realizes that writing a grant is not writing a journal article. This is not about writing your research. It's about persuading your colleagues that your ideas are worth supporting. That's the whole focus of what your grant should be about. You're writing to your colleagues that these are wonderful ideas, they've never been novel, they're unique, haven't been tried before, and they're definitely worth some support. Okay? And that become a student of the program announcement. You have to get into their heads what is it that NIH is looking for. And those things really did improve. Also, serving on grants panels. If you're going to contact your program officer about anything, that's probably the one thing you should contact them for, serving grants panel. And that it provides you with a completely different perspective on you're looking at your grant not only as a writer, but also you're looking at the whole review process and how it works, and how to strengthen your proposal so that it works for you. Be self-critical. Okay? Don't get too arrogant about your ideas. there are probably a lot of other people thinking about your ideas, you're putting them on paper right now. That, don't be able to criticize yourself and evaluate yourself at the same time. And be honest about your shortcomings, where you feel your weaknesses are. I think that's probably very wise advice. And finally, he said, let's assume you do get the award. Do not forget, and I think this is important as well, do not forget that the reason why SCORE exists is because of the fact that you have a lot of underrepresented minorities in your institution. If it wasn't for them, you probably wouldn't be getting this grant, because the program probably wouldn't exist. So keep in mind that if you do get the grant and you continue to be successful, that those students, in one way or another, should be incorporated into your thinking, into your ideas about how to develop the research in your institution. So I learned a lot. I appreciate the interchange. And is there anything else you want to add that I missed? Okay. Any final questions before we? Yes.
So you mentioned reaching out to program officers and having like a list of questions to ask them, and one of them you specified was maybe about the review panel. Could you give some other suggestions for those of us who've never contacted a program officer, or what are appropriate things to ask a program officer?
Appropriate things to ask the program officer.
You be the program officer.
Okay. So program officers, one thing to always keep in mind, they live, breathe, die their program. Okay? They will talk to you ad infinitum about the program itself, what it does, what it wants you, what it wants to do, what it wants to accomplish. You need to understand that they're very much motivated by a successful program. So they want to use you, support you to make their program successful. I was a program officer at NSF for a long, long time. I was surprised as to how few faculty would contact me. I mean, there weren't a lot of faculty who contacted me, but the ones who did contact me, I interacted with and benefited from contacts with me. They talked to me, the ones that I had good relationships with, even talked to me about the shortcomings of their institutions. I mean, it was between us. I understood that. But I also understood that NSF isn't going to penalize an institution for its shortcomings. NSF was always going to make an effort to award, to provide support to the best research. So if you were an excellent researcher in a kind of mediocre institution, you're going to get the grant. So I had good working relationships with the PIs that I worked with and encouraged. But I was surprised as to how few, actually did contact me. My recommendation to you is for SCORE or for NSF is to have a list of questions beforehand that you really are interested in, get information you're interested in getting from NIH. Good questions are, what is the direction of the program SCORE is going? Has there been an internal review of the program itself? Is there an evaluation of the program itself? What does NIH, has there been a report on discussion within NIH about the program's viability and its future? That would be a good way to start, because then you're engaging with things that you're concerned about. You can start there, and then you can kind of spring your research and what you do. They want to know your ideas in terms of how you're going to advance the field your specific discipline. What is it that you're doing that's really pushing the field forward? I mean, that's where I would start. Start with them developing the, yeah.
So I sent my program officer my case and I said, does this fit with this or this panel? And he said, well, it's better with this panel, write it more about, in my case was more about an employee, less about the classroom. And he actually gave me an exercise to agree with my brain. He was amazing. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Just don't be shy. I was terrified I could not put words together on the phone. I just don't know what to ask.
Do
Yeah,
an
just
abstract.
send it, yeah.
Do a short abstract of your research, and ask whether this really fits the goals of the program. Something as simple as that. And, you know, you're gonna get a response. You're probably gonna get a detailed response too.
So, first of all, I'd like to thank John and Ingrid and Dan. This is the first time that the CUNY Office of Research and the RF, through the Office of the Award Pre-Proposal Support, has collaborated on a project, and I think it's been successful in bringing a lot of people together with an interest in SCORE. So I'd like to thank them. And the second is that we brought you together for the day, but we don't want to forget you either. So we will be back in touch with you guys, and we'll talk amongst ourselves about what next steps we can do. John obviously has a sort of review program already in place, but I think for those of you from colleges that have never had SCORE awards before, we can be of service to you in helping to provide the institutional data and helping you to get that through our access to the institutional databases, or at least knowing the people who have the answers to your questions. Because I think this is going to be very important for all of you writing from colleges where you've never had SCORE before. And we look forward to helping you in any way that we can. So thanks again.